Shalom, friends! Welcome to Orange Socks, a podcast celebrating Jewish creativity. I'm your host, Yitzchok Moully, inviting you to join me in exploring the soul of Jewish expression. Shalom, friends! Welcome to the Orange Socks studios, and welcome Hillel Smith.
Hello.
I got Hillel Smith in the studio, which is always a treat for me and for you. And thank you for coming up. We've known each other for, I don't know how long, for quite a while.
A bunch of years now.
But even before we got to know each other, a whole lot of people said, oh, Hillel, you and Hillel, I'm telling you, you and Hillel, you guys got to connect. So maybe 5 different artists told me that. So I'm so happy that we have connected.
I think when I first heard about you or came across your work, I was like, oh, this guy's on a similar wavelength. I think back in the day before Instagram, I think so many of us were just working in our own little micro universes and not having really any idea that anyone else was out there doing similar stuff. And it took the one person who had a piece of yours and then moved across the country and then also knew me and then
I think there was life. There was life before Instagram.
It's hard to think about it.
There were websites, and before that, So, and we've collaborated on a few things, and I'm sure we'll get to that. So let's start. Tell me about your creative origins, your Judaic origins, and how they intersected and created who you are today.
Right. So I think, as is true with, I'd say, a lot of artists, you figure out that it's something that you enjoy from a really, really young age. My parents have a story that they love telling anybody who'll listen, that I was at a friend's birthday party when I was probably about 4. And there was this activity where you have popsicle sticks. They take a Polaroid, popsicle sticks, you make a little frame, and then you decorate it with macaroni.
Okay.
And everyone else did their little thing and then went off to go play.
Right.
And I insisted on spending the entire rest of the birthday party just arranging all the noodles exactly how I wanted them to be.
Nice.
And at the kindergarten that I was at, there was some art show. That was a fundraiser that they had hosted at some other space. And normally it's the parents who buy the kids' work and that's the thing. And some actual other person who did not know our family bought my art piece. So my first art sale was I was 5.
That's awesome. So you've been doing this a long time.
I've been doing this a long time. And so and my parents encouraged it, which I'm really grateful for. Going to Jewish day school, there's not so much art instruction, exactly. And so there's
where did you grow up?
So I grew up in LA.
Okay. Oh, all right.
Pico Robertson, right in the thick of all the stuff.
Yep.
The 770 number 2.
Yep.
Is about 3 blocks from my parents' house.
Okay. All right. So
I was there before they built that building. So yeah, that really right in the middle of that Jewish community, and there's not. At the time, and I have no idea how much this is still true, but at least at the time, you have art class as an activity once a week, and it's pretty lowest common denominator, I would say. And after school, my parents would send me to actual art class, starting in, I was probably about 8.
And that just exposed you to a whole lot of different mediums and processes.
Yeah, well, initially I think it was more, it was just painting, because that was the class that was there. And so you start with acrylic, and then you move on to oil. And then I think I'd really hit my limit at that kids class. And then at around 12 or 13 or so, I think it was probably 8th grade, we went kind of shopping for another art class.
Okay.
My friends found some studio that was pretty close, maybe about 20-minute drive away, that had a kids class and an adult class, and they put me in the adult class.
Nice.
And I think I was there really through all of high school, and there was generally maybe about 2 high schoolers in at a time.
Right.
But it was real technical instruction of drawing with charcoal pencil, and then you move on to using actual charcoal, so you learn tonality, and then moving on to color, and so it was really technical instruction that I really responded to, and
So you got a real head start.
So yeah, so
From a technical perspective.
from a technical perspective, that was really helpful.
Yeah, I bet.
That I have good drafting skills, and
Right.
I
When
can
did you
compose.
first find your own voice creatively? Like in terms of there's so many
Mm,
mediums, there's so many
yeah.
possible ways of expressing.
So I think it was a few things. I think even so simultaneous to me being in after school art class, um, there's still art class at school, which is its lowest common denominator, but it's still, oh, today's activity is X.
Is right,
And it was still a fun excuse for me to play around with different things.
right.
The art class at my high school, whose class I actually did not take, but would ditch class to hang out with her in the
Okay.
studio. Um, Rowan Salem, Zichronella Bracha, who passed away a couple years ago.
Wow.
Um, it was great. You're just like, here's this, let's collage this and whatever you
Just
hear. And so it wasn't,
I'm sure she was so happy to have someone who was
yeah.
interested,
And it was
genuinely
great.
interested.
We bonded. We became very close. And it was never about instruction of making anything that was good. It was just about having a good time because I had 45 minutes to kill.
Right.
And then I'd say that the third track of that is um, I had relatives. So my grandparents really indulged me. My aunts and uncles would take me to the art museum with them because we're in LA and LACMA and
Sure.
the Arm and Hammer Museum.
Right.
And so would go to exhibitions of painters that they thought I might be interested in.
That's incredible.
Starting also from being a pretty little kid. And a bunch of artists.
Were there any artists in the family?
No,
No. Okay.
kind of. I have a cousin who's a filmmaker.
Okay.
Um,
That you interacted with?
yeah, they're not that much older than I am.
Okay.
He went to LA County School of the Arts for film and was doing, or actually, I think at the time it was performance, but um, so yeah, I have a cousin working in film and another cousin who was doing kind of props and set design, was doing stop motion animation with his
Right.
Ninja Turtles action figures. So creative, but
Good.
I was the only
Yeah.
visual person.
Okay.
Um,
And your parents were very comfortable or happy?
yeah,
Did they see, I mean, becoming a professional artist, like that this would be your profession? Did they realize that this is what would happen if they expose you to too much art?
I don't know if they, I don't know if they realized it, but I think that they were okay with it as a possibility.
Okay.
Um, there's a children's book author named Tommy DePaola who wrote a book about kind of semi-autobiographical children's picture book
Sure.
about him being in art class as a kid and how he were told to do things a certain way, and then he did his own thing, and he eventually figured out that it's okay to do his own stuff, and then at the end it's like, oh, this is my story, and now I'm a children's book author.
Right.
And so we had a copy of this book. I don't think it really sunk in as like, oh, this is a path that you could
Right.
that like
Right.
I don't think I got the moral of it
Right.
of this is a thing you could do, but I think the one thing that I did get from the book is, oh, this is a job.
Right.
Like,
Okay.
not
So
that
it's a possibility, not
right, that there's a
necessarily my
possibility.
possibility,
Yeah,
but
like
it's
I
it
have a lot of
exists.
time. I'm a child.
Sure. Yeah.
But
Sure.
that you could be a fireman or you could be an artist, and like that
Right.
seems like a legitimate career
Legitimate.
path.
Nice.
Um,
And this is Jewish day school that you went to.
yeah.
So what was your Judaic parallel to Judaic? I mean, like what kind of background did you have? Do you have?
Yeah, so I went to modern Orthodox day school. My parents were Baal Tshuva, which meant that we had both uh, a pretty grounded view of, or trying to think of the best way to phrase it. So we, on the one hand, very concrete exposure to what Jewish practice was. My parents were also very involved in their community. My mom worked at the Federation. My dad was shul president for a decent number of years. My child overlapping my bar mitzvah, and so being really surrounded by Jewish life, Jewish practice, Jewish involvement, and even though I was in an Orthodox family, an Orthodox shul, in kind of an Orthodox day school, we had this bigger Jewish universe that involved
Right.
our own family members who
Right.
were outside of that.
Right. Well, LA has a
So LA is
pretty
huge.
big Jewish
LA
universe.
is a big Jewish universe. I mean, you have
Yeah.
giant conservative shuls and reform shuls, and it's heavily Israeli and heavily Persian, and people who come from all different kinds of Judaism, and there's conflict, but there's also a lot of kind of synthesis, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
That
So it's a healthy, nice, vibrant Jewish world to
yeah.
to begin in. Yeah.
And so I think it's Jews. There's going to be animosity, and
Yeah,
there's going to
that's just
be weird things that you look back on and I feel distasteful about certain parts of the community. But it's also true that uh, you have these secular Israeli families who send their kids to Orthodox day school,
right,
um, and these and other families who fled Iran after the Shah fell, who were
right,
also in middle school with
right,
me,
right.
um, and who have a very different perspective on what it means to be Jewish, and then
Which is healthy, which is
which
great.
is healthy.
Yeah.
And even within the Ashkenazi world, my high school was easily a third kids from conservative families.
Okay.
Um, uh, Everyone's kind of doing
Doing
their
their thing.
own
Yeah,
thing,
that's good.
and I don't think I really internalized uh, how good that was of a mode of growing up in until much, much later.
Yeah. Well, often we don't realize, the perspective, from a broader perspective, what we have at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. At what point? Because your work is now like
Oh,
Jewish.
yeah.
So at what point did your Judaism impact your
So,
creativity, or how
so
did they?
basically, never as a kid. And so back to the third track. So I'd say you're talking about kind of my artistic mind. So I think there was the technical art class and the art museum stuff with my with the family, and then I'd say that the third track of this was um, I grew up on comic books and cartoons. That
Nice.
I started reading Spider-Man really when I started to read.
Right.
There's a comic book shop that was a few blocks from our house. I was spending all
Your
of
own
my
money.
allowance money on Spider-Man starting at, I don't know, 8, 9.
Not on art
Um,
supplies, on
no, on
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. Because
Someone else can buy
the
art
art
supplies.
supplies I get is a gift. Right? Like that's birthday Hanukkah territory.
There
I
you
don't
go,
need.
exactly.
But the comic books I had to buy the comics, and I loved the style of it, the colors, the excitement that's really inherent in the medium. And um, in like the end of middle school through high school, I was doodling versions of the logos of all the different X-Men titles in my notebooks,
Okay.
which I thought was really cool. How you design these letters into different
Right.
shapes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I figured out, I don't know, probably 8 years later that was a discipline called graphic design.
Right.
But at
Of
the time, I
course.
was like, oh, this
It's
is a
just
cool way of drawing letters.
right.
Um,
And you'd create your own logos at the time, or
yeah.
your own
So I'd
variations
invent
of.
little
Yeah.
superhero characters, and then you can't have a superhero character if he doesn't have a superhero name. But you can't have a superhero name unless the
They have
name is
that
written in a
emblem.
logo. Not even the emblem. Like
Right.
sometimes
Oh, okay.
it's weird that Galactus has a G.
Right.
But Galactus is from space. He doesn't
Right.
speak English. Why does he have a G on his belt? Um, but but the word Galactus, when he's on the cover of whatever Fantastic Four comic, it
Gotta
says it
be
in a
there.
really cool
Yeah.
lettering style. So all
Right.
your superheroes also have to have cool lettering styles.
Right.
Um, and I don't think it was till I got to college that I understood that lettering and typography, these were disciplines.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
Because
so
typography really does play into your work.
so much.
Yeah.
And so yeah, as far as the Jewish stuff and the art stuff connected, I would say essentially not at all.
Okay.
I didn't understand how they could go together. Uh, I had never seen, I would say, Jewish painting that struck any kind of chord or looked
Right.
interesting at all.
So
Most
everything
of
was
the
like old Fiddler on the Roof
it's
kind
like
of.
it's Fiddler on the Roof. It's people. It's portraits of rabbis
Right.
in watercolor and
Yep.
shtetl landscapes, or abstracted Jerusalem cityscapes, right, with your square houses and your little dome roof. And it's not that interesting after a while.
Right.
My parents did have a couple Mordechai Rosenstein prints in the house,
Okay.
which I thought were cool,
Right.
but I was like, well, they have two of these, but he's not famous, so and so I don't think I understood either the importance of him, who's
Right.
since become an enormous hero of mine,
Sure.
um, but also that this could be that it was a thing, that these
Right.
things could
Right.
overlap. And it wasn't until I had graduated college. So
So did you took
but
art? You took fine
kind of.
arts in college?
I got to college. I thought, oh, I'm gonna major in something collegiate, and then I'll minor in art.
Okay.
Uh, Part of the deal with my parents was that I could study whatever I wanted to in college, if I went to liberal arts school.
Okay.
They didn't want me going to art school, because they wanted me to have a more
Rounded
rounded
education.
education. Fine.
A plan B.
Yeah. So I went through a bunch of majors. I was a communications major for a little bit. I was a linguistic anthropology major for a little bit. And one problem with the fine art major is, if you major in fine art, you generally have to specialize. So
Right.
you're majoring in art with you're specializing in drawing or sculpture.
Right. Right.
And I had no interest in specializing in disciplines.
You just
This
want
is I
to.
want to do all the things.
Yeah. Right. Of
Um,
course.
And a friend of mine pointed out to me after, I think by the end of my sophomore year, after I'd cycled through so many majors, what are you doing? I went to University of Pennsylvania undergrad, and they had just started a program called Visual Studies, which was an interdisciplinary fine art history, philosophy program.
So they caved in. They gave you what you needed.
They gave me what I needed. It had just started. They knew that I was there.
I bet your parents sponsored the whole wing, right?
Basically.
To be able to get you there.
And the coolest thing about this program was it was learning about the visual world from different perspectives. And I chose from the art perspective, from the making perspective. But we also, as part of the major, had to learn about art making from a historical perspective,
Right.
vision, aesthetics from a philosophical perspective, vision from a brain science perspective, how your brain processes visual information. And there's so many overlaps. And the coolest part about this program is that they emphasize the overlaps of how you can talk about color theory from a composition perspective, how you're making a painting. You can talk about it from a historical perspective of how color has been understood through art history and the invention of the color wheel as an artistic tool. And from a brain science perspective, how your brain physically understands color information.
And relates to, and then the emotions of color.
Yeah, and all these things play together. And so the way an artist is choosing color from, say, a philosophical perspective and art historical perspective, factors into the technological aspect of when pigments were invented and how those reflect back into the historical part.
Right.
But then also how the brain interprets colors and how you're mixing colors and the chemical properties of all this stuff. And so having that all come together, I thought was brilliant.
Right. That sounds a lot more technical than visual almost than hands-on, tactile.
Like well, and then I had a class that was literally called color in the art department where we're doing, most of the class was you're doing painting on mylar sheets and then making your mock-ups and cutouts and seeing how colors play next to each other. But then that goes back into op art and how these things work, op art and pop art and how all this works together. And I would say, and I still at all of that was pretty involved in the Jewish community on campus.
Right, that was my next question.
Yeah.
How did you show up Judaically?
Yeah, so I was involved in the Jewish community on campus, meaning that's where my friends were, and
Hillel went to Hillel?
I lived directly across the street from Hillel. Unfortunately, the Hillel at Penn is called Steinhardt Hall, and all of the stuff says Hillel at Penn, Steinhardt Hall in big letters.
Right.
And I'd have to go to other friends' colleges to steal merch that had my name on it.
The irony.
Which is ridiculous. But yeah, so even throughout all of that, it was unusual to be an art kid in the Jewish community on campus because...
Doctors, lawyers.
Yeah, and at Penn, finance and...
Right.
And onto all of that, on top of the doctors and lawyers part.
Right.
And so I did feel a little bit like the odd man out of, you guys are all doing this. I don't think you really understand what's going on in my head or in the rest of my life, but I live across the street intentionally from Hillel so that I could roll out of bed and get lunch.
Right.
Because that's what you do in college is you roll out of bed at 11:30 and get lunch. And yeah, and even throughout all of that, I never saw these two things as overlapping. And it wasn't until I'd say it was a few years out of college. I was doing some small format painting stuff, trying to get some stuff into group shows in downtown LA with some success. And at one point was playing around with, I got into spray paint stenciling, and was playing around with some lettering styles that involved overlapping different colors. So if you're stenciling, each color layer is going to be one stencil, and then
Sure.
if you want a second color, you can do another layer. And so I had designed a set of Hebrew letter forms that were a bunch of basically rectangles in orange and then in blue. And if once they were overlapped in the two layers, then you could actually spell that stuff. It was a fun activity.
To create a third color in the middle, or
Well,
just
so it's
you?
darker in the middle. It's not a third
Right.
color, but it's so
Okay.
orange. It kind of made a purplish color,
Right.
but it was more about the opacity of the tone.
Right.
Um, and I had done a piece, and I ended up choosing a quote from Herzl and had a Shepherd Fairy style Herzl portrait on top, and showed it to a friend of mine who was a curator at USC Hillel and said, "I made this thing. What do you think?" And she's like, "This is great.
Right.
I know you're doing all your other stuff, but this is good. No one else is doing it. Also, you seem interested in doing more of this.
Right.
You should do more of this, and you should focus on this." And I think that's when it finally hit me when I was already in my mid 20s and had spent my entire life simultaneously both in this Jewish bucket over here and in this art bucket over here, racking up all kinds of experiences in both worlds that I think that were still just completely separate. And it was that
Independent of each other.
completely independent.
So
And
there wasn't friction. It was just these were just your two
there was
worlds.
no friction.
Right. Right.
I know that some people there's this whole my name is Asher Lev mentality
Sure.
of like
Sure.
the deep friction inside of you
Sure.
that there's so much conflict. And no, I do art. This
Right.
is my job. This is my life. I also have my art friends and I have my art this, and I also have my Jewish life and
Sure.
my Jewish friends. And maybe it's a little awkward at my birthday party when people come up and like don't interact.
But this is what
But
it
there's no
is.
conflict. It was
Yeah.
just like, this is my life. My life
There's
has two personalities in it, and it's fine.
there's a joke that I quote in some of my speeches, but it says what's one difference in men and women is men are very compartmentalized, and every part of their life
Sure.
they keep in different boxes. And then he jokes that women are like one continuous strand of
Yeah.
everything's interconnected and interwoven, but you really personify these are your two
Yeah.
worlds, and they were happily coexisting,
Yeah.
but independent of each other.
And I think I never actually thought about this before, but I think parts of the way that I was raised kind of led to that we can have our family's religious observance, and that's fine. And other people can have their religious observance, and that's also fine.
Right.
And here I am doing this as my art practice, and that's fine. And other people are doing another thing, and that's fine. And if you want, you can dip your toe into there, and that's okay. Um, and it just, yeah, it never occurred to me that it could be the same until until I made this piece, and then I showed it to my friend, and I got some encouragement. And then once I started working on it, it all the different pieces started falling into place
Nice.
in a way that I had never expected, in a way that, in retrospect, almost too neatly.
Right.
Right? It's when you're watching a movie and you see them putting all the pieces into place, and you're like, this is so dumb. I know where this is going.
Right.
I had no idea where this was going, and
But it was going.
and now I'm looking back on all the different parts of my practice that the technical drawing element is there. The typography element is there from the X-Men logos. The multimedia element is there. The deep breath, like deep Jewish knowledge stuff is there. The art historical perspective is there. My interest in researching historical stuff and using that to inform the work is there.
Right.
Everything that I learned in college about the brain science stuff informs the optical illusion stuff that I put in the work. And
Right.
all of the I had a graphic design professor who talked a lot about how technological innovation led to other kinds of quirky conventions in typography. So like the reason you have an indentation at the beginning of a paragraph
Right.
has to do with the invention of printing and the movement from handwritten manuscripts into printed books with movable type.
Right.
And that approach now informs a lot of the Jewish work that I do. And then it made me think, well, is there a history of Jewish graphic design? So I started doing research into this. And if I'm an artist in residence now, I'm not doing art projects over Shabbat with any of the communities that I'm with, but I have at this point a decade's worth of research onto Jewish graphic design and typography that
Right.
I'm thrilled to talk to
Dying
anyone to anyone who will listen. We'll talk to you about this and that approach that now informs the way that I think about Jewish history.
That's awesome. So would you say God lined up the stars? Is
Yeah,
that
there's
is that
like
how you
so
see
much.
it?
There's so much hashgacha pratis of like of how all of this works that it, I'm almost shocked by how neatly it all
Came
came
together.
together um and it makes me a little bit sad to think how oblivious I was in my own life
To this
to
going
this
on.
to this happening
You
in
were Truman in your own Truman show. I mean,
yeah
it was almost like the wax on, wax off, but you were doing it yourself without realizing how well it connected.
right and
So,
then when I then later as an adult and I started thinking oh I'm doing all these I I've been doing posters theater for some of my friends' theater groups in college,
right.
which I thought was such a fun activity. How do you take a whole story of in this play and then turn that into a single graphic image? And it's a
That
play, so we're not
communicates.
using it's not like a a big what they call a big head movie poster where it's whatever movie starring uh, Tom Cruise and it's the big
Right.
still of Tom Cruise with an airplane on the bottom.
All
And
the
it's
right.
so not interesting.
Right.
Um, but then you look back and okay, well, before you had this, you had theater posters. Still, now you have concert posters.
Right.
And how do you take the vibe of a band and turn that into a piece?
Right.
And I thought that was such a fun
Challenge.
challenge.
Yeah.
And how do I do this? So I started doing posters for friends in college, and then I graduated, and so some of my friends became theater professionals, and I did stuff for them. I met the comedian Patton Oswalt at a show, and gave my card, and have since done maybe about 6 or 8 posters for him, and I've done a couple for some other comedians. And I find it so fun that I was thinking, okay, well, I like that aesthetic, that approach. What if I applied that to Jewish stuff?
Right.
And the two things that hit me at that point of is one, why has no one told me that
Done
this
this
is a
yet?
thing that I could do before? Because this is such a meaningful way of learning and engaging with material.
Yeah.
And so that led to what was first a series of brachot and various quotes from different parts of Jewish life, and then that turned into a series that I called the Parsha Poster series.
Exactly. The Parsha part, they're really cool.
Thank you. And so the whole
They're really cool visually, but they're really cool when you see the connection from the content of the Parsha being communicated visually. That like on the surface it just looks cool, but then when you know the Parsha, then it's like, oh, this is really cool. Like why you chose this for this and that for that. Yeah, I remember going through them and going, oh, that's awesome. Oh,
Thank
that's
you.
really
Hey,
awesome.
and that was the goal of how do I take this material and use this approach to the text is the same way that I would do if I'm doing a theater show. Um, and when I started it, I had done a couple, again, showed it to a friend. I was like, is this a good idea? And she said, Jacqueline Nichols, amazing Jewish artist. And she said, yeah, this is cool. You should keep doing this. Like, okay. So I started at the beginning and all the stories in Bereshit. You know the stories in Bereshit, right? Like the creation of the world, the flood. I figured, okay, so I'm just dialing it in. How do I do really cool things of how do I do the flood in a way that no one's ever done the flood?
Right.
Um, and then I figured, well, I should probably just read the text. And I think by the time I think Vayishlach was the first one that I really had an epiphany that this was not just a way of doing a cool art project, that this was a way of learning Torah for me.
Right.
That I'm reading through the Parsha, and Vayishlach has it's Yaakov wrestling with the angel. Every major artist has done this, Jewish, Christian. And I get to this figure, okay, well, how do I do this visually? And then I looked at it for a second. This is not the story. If my goal of doing this series is to take a pivotal moment in this parsha, this is not a pivotal moment in the parsha. This is an afterthought.
Right.
It's
a detail, but
it's a detail. But this whole story is taking place as they're leaving Shem. Why are they leaving Shem? Because the story of Shem happened.
Right.
That's the story.
Right.
And then I'm reading through the text, and I'm thinking, oh wow, this is powerful. How do I do this? And then it shifted my whole perspective, where instead of thinking about, well, how do I take the stories that we know, to thinking, oh no, I need to read this from scratch. I need to ignore anything that I've learned from any of the Mefarshim, any of the commentaries, and just get into the text, read the Pshat, see what the Pshat says. And then if I have questions about the Pshat, then look at commentary.
Interesting. You
But
wouldn't
to
even
try
look
to
at no, wouldn't even look at Rashi. Just
No, I don't
straight
want to look
text.
at Midrash unless I have a question.
Gotcha.
Because I think the pshat itself, right, the original text, there's ambiguity there. There's um, visual language in there,
Yeah.
and we have thousands of years of reflection and explanation and all of this. Um, but I think that there's this little Midrash says version of Jewish learning of the first thing is Moshe is in the basket,
Right.
and Badia, daughter of Paro, reaches out her arm and her arm stretches. That's
Right.
not in the text.
Right.
It's a story that has meaning,
Right.
but that's not in the text.
Right.
And so if we want to engage in the text, we have to take the step back and say, what does the text say? And then if there's ambiguity there, or if there's something that the text leaves out, then think about, well, what's leaving in the blank, because that's not the only story about her.
Sure.
There's conflicting stories, right? There's the conflicting story of that the Bnei Israel's at Har Sinai, and one midrash is that they're really asking for this,
Right.
and the other story is that the mountain is over their heads and they have to do it, or else they die.
Right.
And those can't both be true, unless it's Judaism, in which case they are both true.
Right.
But truth, in that sense, is a different kind of concept. It's not objective truth. It's I guess it's a philosophical truth.
Right.
And I think, yeah. So, and as part of this project, it was, how do I get back to the essence of these stories, and then, in some cases, rely on Rashi and other Mefarshim, and think of, okay, well, how did all of them understand this? But also, even among them, there's
so much
conflict.
Even Panim LaTorah, there's so many opinions.
And then in some cases, I'll have a take on this that, as far as I'm aware, no one else has had before. But it seems so deeply true to me.
Right.
So
were there some weeks that you couldn't decide which direction to go? There were so many potential, especially further along where it's less narrative.
Yeah.
And you could choose any number of, because once you choose one, that's it. You're sticking
yeah.
You can't. You don't break it down to being 4 different elements of the parsha. There's just one fundamental, part that you're focusing on.
Yeah, and there's some. I think Mitzorah it's a really short parsha, and so it's usually not by itself. And and that year conveniently was a leap year, so I only had one double parsha, which I was doing them one a week.
Right.
For that week's parsha, and so that made it easier. But Mitzorah
that was my other question.
Yeah, I did it one week.
I
started. I think I had done a draft of Bereshit and Noach before the year started, and then refined it a little bit as it started. And then I think starting at Lech Lecha, I was doing it one a week. That I'd sit down with Chumash, usually probably on Sunday, and then by Wednesday I had to have a draft because it had to be online by Thursday.
I love that. I love the self-imposed deadline.
It would never get done.
It would never get done.
I know myself too well. It would never get done. And yeah, Mitzorah is just about Tzorah.
Right.
That's the whole parsha.
Yep.
And so in some cases, I don't know that I learned anything deeply about it, but then it's, how does it make me feel when I'm reading it?
Right.
What visual language is there in the Torah that I could pull back out?
Right.
How do I translate that back in visual form to give you as a viewer the same feeling looking at this as I'm understanding the story or this passage to have?
Right.
And so, and so all of this, I feel like so much of this happens organically that we go through life and we do an art project and then discover halfway through that this has precedence in so much of our past, and then it all comes out and all comes together.
Right.
And that you make new discoveries about yourself, about how you think about things, that this project crystallized for me so many different aspects of how I think about Judaism, about learning, about art, about graphic design, about typography, about what I'm looking for stuff. And going back to Mordechai Rosenstein, like that was after I'm going through this, I'm thinking, well, who else has done this kind of stuff? Oh, he did.
Yeah, it's been up on my wall.
It's been up at my parents' house since I was a child.
Right.
Oh, Ludwig Volpert.
Right.
He died like 60 years ago. he was doing the same thing with typography. How come
Right.
I didn't know about this guy before?
Right.
And I find, I don't know what I said about me, disappointed, I guess, or sad that I'd gone through my whole life and not known that
Well, your whole
that
life is not
which I up till that
up
point,
till that point, but you got,
right? Like
there's a whole lot of tomorrow.
right, that I was today years old when,
Right.
as the kids say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was today years old when I learned that there was this whole
Rich history of
rich history of
Right.
Jews making amazing contemporary art that was deeply informed their by their upbringing, but also by the artistic movements that they were living inside of. That
Right.
uh, there's a shul in Paris, in the Marais, that was designed by the same architect who did the Paris Metro, and being in this space, being in an Art Nouveau shul,
Right.
mind blowing.
Right.
You go to a lot of shuls and they look. There's a kind of a few buckets that the shuls fall in.
Right.
Right, there's this Moorish design, which has its own historical precedence, which, if you get into Jewish history, is fascinating. Why Ashkenazi Jews in Europe started doing these Sephardi-style shuls
Right.
in the late 19th century, and how that fits into their conception of Jewish identity. It's an entire conversation we can have for an hour.
Wow.
But like that's cool. And then I find a lot of modern shuls look kind of like somewhere between a theater and a bank. Like they're nice, but they're
Right.
pleasant, but they're not. I feel like they're not innovative in the same way or
Right.
interesting. You walk in, and being in this shul in Paris this is the feeling that I get when I'm in a cathedral.
Right.
Right, a cathedral is, you want this. You're taking, it's 1300, and you're the archbishop of whatever, and you have so much money, and you build this massive monument to God. And I feel like between uh, oppression and anti-Semitism and poverty, Jews never quite got that opportunity.
Well, there
except
are a
in a
few.
few,
There's
except
a
in a
few in
cases.
Europe. I mean, there's Florence has.
Oh, the
Yeah.
Casa Maggiore in northern Italy is the most stunning Jewish space I've ever seen.
Right.
And these exist, but
Yeah.
again, it's like I didn't know about them. And then and so being in some of these spaces and to think that, oh yeah, the Jews in 17th century Florence and 18th century northern Italy and 1920s Paris, they're just taking all of this and infusing it in, and Ludwig Wilpert is in taking Art Deco inspiration and doing amazing metalwork and doing breastplates and fences on doors and all of this stuff, incorporating Hebrew letter forms
Yeah.
in ways that I've never seen before. And then the more you get into it, these Marc Chagall, before he was famous for being a painter,
Right.
was doing interesting lettering on the cover of Yiddish literary magazines in the 19 teens.
Amazing.
And stuff that directly influences my work now, both aesthetically, but also because he's looking around and seeing what his contemporaries are doing in the literary scene and saying, oh, like that's really cool that this cubist stuff and this abstract stuff, I'm going to try that with Hebrew letters in Yiddish. And it's so cool. And like
it really is. I mean, it's something that as Jews historically, that we really do pick up some of the flavor of our local surroundings. I mean, the whole just Ashkenaz and Sfard and the dress and so on. But I have to find out.
Interrupt you for that. It's not some. It's so much.
Oh, absolutely.
It's so much. It's the language. It's the mannerisms. It's the appreciation. Like you can.
It's the food.
It's the food. It's the ingredients, and we put our own spin on it.
Sure.
But
we make it our own.
And we make it our own. And I think that's, you talk about Kedusha. Like it's about, we make it our own, and that's what makes it holy. That we take this thing from somewhere else. You take a German poppy seed cooking, you make it a Hamantash.
I mean, going back to shuls, there is no, other than the Beis Hamikdash, the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the desert, and the Bet Hamikdash, the temple in Jerusalem. Those, as far as I know, the only,
I would
am I wrong?
With you with
Okay, well, let me finish the sentence.
Because even the Beit Hamikdash who built the Beit Hamikdash?
I mean, who built the Bet Hamikdash?
Not who commissioned it.
Right.
Who physically constructed it in the Torah? He gets all these workers. They come down from Lebanon. They come over from here,
Right.
and so you have all these people. And then look at look at Palmyra. It
So
looks
is it only the Mishkan that is said by God, okay, this is how I want you to build it? The Beit HaMikdash was open to
probably.
interpretation?
I
Okay,
think so. The Beit
we gotta
HaMikdash.
find
Look
out.
at
Well,
any.
all the columns and all the, yes,
Yeah,
there was definitely,
because
influence from its
you live
time.
in a society and you look around you and see what's beautiful, and you put that in. I remember
So I was going to
seeing.
mention there's someone I know is a son-in-law of the rabbi in Scotland. So I gotta find him and actually, but he did his thesis on, and I forget which text it was, but it was a particular, it was a commentary by a particular one of the Rishonim or something, and he has the exact same text in Hebrew, written in France, written in Germany, and written in, I forget, a third place. And you look at the text and it looks like, old Gaelic, it looks like old
Yeah,
German, Gothic, and it looks the third one, I forget what it is. And like he had to like, okay, this is an aleph, this is a shin, this is a mem, and now you can start deciphering it. And it was all Hebrew. It
yeah,
was all Hebrew script. And yet it was worlds apart. And really it embodied the local,
and it's not.
the local lettering, the local
Yeah,
way of, and we think, people today with Streimels, and yeah, Moshe Rabbeinu wore a Streimel, but we really do. We really are a reflection of our times.
so much, and I think it that message gets lost, and that's one thing. Whenever I teach, I try to express that of you might think that your Judaica has to look a certain way. The Kiddush cup on your table has to look like this. Your candlesticks have to be Baroque silver candlesticks with little florals on the top. That's complete no,
Right. It's just what our
nonsensical.
parents and grandparents
Right.
did.
And if you think the reason, first of all, it makes no sense. The only thing you have to have is you have to have, there's the only halacha here, the only obligation that you have is you have to have the wine.
Right.
You have to have the candles. How it looks, it should be beautiful.
Well, that's the thing. It should be beautiful.
Like,
Hidur
what does that
mitzvah.
mean?
What defined beauty?
Yeah,
And beauty evolves
it evolves.
based
And
on
our tastes are so
influenced by what's around us.
influenced by what's around us to the point that your platonic ideal Shabbat candlesticks, the historical reason that that moment of Baroque silverwork in mid 19th century Europe, like that's when the Jews had enough money to buy that kind of stuff that was
Right.
popular at the time, and then they gave it to their kids, who gave it to their kids, who gave it to their kids, who fled Europe with that and brought it to America, and now you think that that's how you need to observe Judaism because that's how it connects to your family. Yes, that connects you to your ancestors, but
Right.
also maybe it
Only
doesn't
only
inspire you.
only 2 generations back
Yeah, but also
necessarily.
maybe it doesn't inspire you.
Exactly.
And
Well, the
so
question
why
is,
not?
are we locked in? Because it seems to be. I mean, we've only been in the New World, in America, 100 years, 200 years. The Jews have been here. I don't know, maybe more. 300 years. But
Yeah,
but really since post-war, since 1901, let's say, like there's definitely been a okay, this is Judaism. Like this is
yeah,
will it evolve?
I think so. I mean, I think
Or are we locked into that was the old world? We brought it with us. This is what it needs to be.
yeah,
It must be silver candlesticks. It must be a
I think
silver,
it's a little
I
of
mean,
both. I mean, I
the
think
goblets, the Kiddush cup.
right as we have here. I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I worry that you have a whole generation of kids who were trained like I was that this is your Judaism, and that it took me until my adulthood to figure out that, or to really discover that, oh, not only can you make things look in all kinds of different ways, and that there are current artists doing amazing stuff. Talking about Kiddush cups, Arik Weiss does in
Oh,
Israel does
love the guy.
brilliant, crazy stuff, and also
With deep meaning.
with
It's
deep
not just
meaning.
about
Yeah,
change for change's sake.
and then also in Israel, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on her name, and I feel horrible about this. Sari Srulovitz, who's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant silversmith. Who's
from England, right? Is that
no. Her studio is on is in the artist colony. It's right next to Kol Haot. You should definitely check it out. It is
yes.
beautiful, sleek, inspired work working in a completely different vein as Arik, but it's modern, it's gorgeous,
Right.
it's technically excellent, and uh, and that those can live in the same environment,
Yeah.
and not just that they're doing this now, but that Jews have been doing this I keep going back to Ludwig Wilbert, who's doing this in the
Right.
1940s. And I think that my understanding of what happened is twofold. One is that you have this large group of people who flee Europe. They come here, they, for either personal or practical or other kinds of concerns, the observance slips a little bit, their attachment to Jewish tradition slips a little bit, the families kind of assimilate, and then as they're looking for something, the thing that's accessible is the thing that is
They brought with
ubiquitous,
them. Right.
right? It's the thing that they inherited, or it's the thing that you go to the Judaic resort, it's the thing that's already there.
Right.
And so I think that's certainly part of it, and I think the other part of it is the Holocaust, that you had all of these amazing artists in Odessa, in Prague, in Vienna, in Warsaw, who were doing stuff in the 20s and 30s that you look at it now and it looks like it was done today.
Yeah.
It looks like it was done tomorrow, right? This stuff
So you got
is
to show me some of that.
this stuff is I'm thrilled
Yeah.
to give you some links. And it's so amazing what these people were doing, and that entire world was erased.
Right.
And then when the remainders of that world left, they came either to America or to Israel. The ones who came to America, by and large, with a few exceptions, kind of went into this general Americanized world where you have a few archetypes, and America's a place of business and
Right. Well, that had to
and if you
survive.
do something, yeah, and also,
Yeah.
but if you have things that are unique are less marketable,
Right.
because not I love things that are unique. You love things that are unique. Most people don't want things that are unique. Most
Right.
people shop at Target and Walmart,
Right. Right.
which is fine.
Right.
But like, I'm not gonna get my stuff at at the big box Judaica store because I want something that has that little extra something in it.
Yeah.
I'm interested in spending the extra money on buying something that's beautiful and meaningful from a person whose story is inspiring to me, whose vision I think is interesting. And most people, I don't think this is a fault. I just think that's just human nature. Most people
don't think about it so
because
much.
people don't think about it, and it's also like not everyone finds it meaningful,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is fine.
Yeah.
And the ones who come to Israel, I think there's the Jewish community as before the state and then after the state's established, I think moves in two different directions. That there's the half of the community that sees Israel as a state as the culmination of Judaism and abandons practice, and then you have the Haredi world who cuts himself off from the modern world and sees just involvement in their known or the ancestral Judaism known to them
Right.
as their practice. And then so you have these three buckets,
Right.
and the creatives kind of get lost. I get the sense that until really the 60s, 70s with the New Jewish Catalog and in America, and then kind of later waves of Jews making Aliyah and thinking like, how come this stuff all looks the same, and kind of this bleeding between the different, the purely secular and then the Haredi world that you had. There's this whole Jewish
This
world
overlap,
in between, and
right.
people are coming in, and I think that's really when the world starts changing back. And my hope for the future is that the work that we are doing,
Right.
that I'm doing, that you're doing, that all the other artists that we know and love and are working with, that stuff gets noticed and that it's visible, and that the people who need to find it find it.
Yes. Well, it has been said that we are living in a Jewish art renaissance, so the golden age of Jewish art. And we've worked together for the Jerusalem Biannual, did a show together. I mean, the Jerusalem Biannual on its own
is an amazing thing.
I plan on Rami, the founder of the Jerusalem Biannual, is coming to New York within the next month. So we're going to sit down and we're going to talk, and we'll get his worldview and what and why. But yeah, he brings together Jewish artists, but it's not about exploring Jewish concepts, and it's not Judaica, and it's not you're Jewish, but your work better not be anywhere close to Judaism.
Right.
It is this confluence, and I think people are noticing. I think
it's so cool that I've gone out of my way to be there in person, because I think you can see the work online, you can get the catalog. It doesn't compare to being in the space, to seeing the thing that's you didn't go to see that's at the end of the hallway over there, and also just being in community
I
with other
I
artists
would say that's
and
to me
not just art and
that's
aficionados. Yeah,
yeah, that to me is an even greater, the community. That there is such a vibrant, Jewish art community. It's a global community, and we're connected more and more online in different groups and so on. But yeah, coming together in
yeah,
Jerusalem for the Jerusalem Biannual, which I missed being in person this
I
year,
know.
but we'll make up for it.
But we got you
Uh,
there in spirit on the
you did.
wall.
You got my stuff on the wall, which I greatly, greatly thankful to you for. Yeah, so we're all creating, and they're seeing each other's work and being aware and going, oh wow, like I do a silk screen workshop, and part of the
Yeah,
process, everyone starts with a blank canvas, and I tell them step one is just abstract, just put a little bit of yourself on the canvas, and halfway through I stop everyone. I'm like, put your brushes down. They're like, oh, I'm not finished, and everyone hold it up, and everyone together show it to each other, and go,
yeah.
oh wow, and so yeah, this is a little bit of me on the canvas, and people seeing each other. That yeah, I see your work and I go wow,
Hmm.
and that that we're not alone
Yeah,
creating, but we're creating, again with all this global influence, that
yeah.
Jews from everywhere.
I think
Um,
that was the crux of the most recent show, that I did in Jerusalem this past, supposed to be November, this past March,
for the biannual,
for the biennial. That the idea was, I've been doing these poster prints because I came from this graphic design background, and I started doing these prints, and I think this is a cool medium, and it took me a while to discover that there's a bunch of other people doing this, not just now, but decades ago. Um, and this is an overlooked art form,
right,
because most of the time you go to a gallery and you expect there to be paintings or more original stuff, not the
right,
kinds of stuff that you might have in your house and put in your kid's bedroom or in
right,
your living room. And to me, that was almost the opposite of, no, the stuff that you have in your house, the stuff that's selling for between 20 and $150, that's the stuff.
that's a reflection
That's a
of
reflection of
what's
how
going
we
on.
are doing Judaism. That's
Yeah,
how people. That's the Judaism people are bringing to their houses, into their shuls, not into the sanctuary, but into the office, in the
right,
lobby.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
it's the
and
iconography that we're relating to.
yeah, and so how do I reflect back Judaism today, Judaism of the last century, through art, in a way that's not necessarily about the artist, but also these people are making things for a market. It's not
Right,
just the stuff that I'm making because it's a painting and I hope to sell it, but the stuff that I'm making that I have on my personal online store, that I'm just making l'shem shamayim to put on my Instagram.
right,
And finding this community of people, and there were a few people who I knew who were doing it. So you were one of my first calls. I know you've been doing prints possibly longer than I have, um, by a few years, and knowing that I'd been working my own little bubble and
right,
doing my own little thing. Again, like talking about the conflict at the beginning, I didn't feel as conflict that, oh, no one else is doing this work. I feel so sad. No, like, no,
right,
I'm doing this thing, and
right,
that's life. I'll be a little lonely, but I'm okay with that.
right.
I've spent most of my life being a little bit lonely, and because I'm the odd one in whichever context that I'm in. Um, and to say, no,
There's a whole lot of us out there.
there's 4 dozen people in this show
Right,
who live all over the world, some in big Jewish communities in major cities, some in tiny Jewish communities in far-flung places around the world. Um, how cool is that?
yeah,
That we're all doing this vibrant, modern stuff in vastly different styles, bringing in different influences. I'm not big on Kabbalah, but that person is,
right,
and that person is making brilliant work.
yeah, yeah,
How cool is this person who did this Omer series? That's completely different than the other Omer series that's in
right,
here.
right, yeah,
Um,
that's
and and I yeah, and so being able to be in community with all these other people, even though this is mostly a virtual community,
right,
um, is empowering. It makes you feel better that, talking about yeah, like I have my orange socks, but I know that you had purple ones. That's so cool.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, and we feed off each other. It just
So
it
much.
grows.
Yeah.
Very much so.
And it not and some of it is feeding off the direct inspiration of I really like the way you did that thing. That color palette is really cool, but some of it's I like the way that you're approaching that.
Right,
Of that's a really interesting insight of taking this thing and making it into 3 dimensions.
right.
Or that's a beautiful way of encountering this piece of text. I'm going to use that same approach and look at a completely different holiday using my style, my thing, but just feeding off the energy
Yeah, no,
that you're giving
it's
out.
it's the creating the possibility, like you said
Yeah.
by that book in the beginning. Is
And the permission
it was
structure.
yeah. I mean, I don't feel like we need permission
Oh,
anymore.
right. Well, I think that I don't feel like I need permission to do the stuff that, well, I take that back. I mean, even, not that I feel like we need permission to do the stuff they're doing, but I feel like for all of us, there was that moment, right? The first Jewish piece that I did.
Right,
For some of my friends who went through a similar kind of thing, the first piece that they did, it felt maybe like a gamble, maybe like a
right,
throwaway thing of, I want to see how this goes. If people respond to it, then I'll do more.
right,
And once people do, then you realize, oh, other people like this too. And that's when it goes from your notebook, from your head,
right,
into a thing that you're actually willing to put in the time and effort to, because then it becomes a thing that you can share with somebody.
right. So that's what someone else is one of my guesses dubbed the Moully paradigm. But all creative process is what you say, how you say it, and how you share it with the world.
Yeah.
And here we're celebrating how you share it with the world. That it really is about other, and knowing
Yeah.
that other is creating gives us permission to create, or gives us, the opportunity to create. And it's a visual language that we're creating that we're sharing
Yeah.
with others.
Yeah.
And yeah, each one is different, but number one, they're all posters. They're all two-dimensional. Like there are certain parameters that
Yeah.
this series we're creating under. But yeah, it's knowing that okay, if that was appreciated, then chances are this will be appreciated. Chances are that'll be appreciated. That we can push the envelope, but still
Yeah.
stay within a certain, framework.
Yeah. I think,
But posters not all you do.
right. So
We're running out of time, and there's like so much more to talk about.
And so I love small format. I love working digitally. It's cool. It's iterative. It's great. But I love working at scale.
Yes.
Murals is one of the other things that I'm really, really passionate about. That also happened totally accidentally in one of these Hashgacha practice things that with the comic book store that was 2 blocks from my house that I would go buy Spider-Man stuff. They closed when I was 10. And the next closest comic book shop was maybe about I don't know, 20-minute bike ride across town.
Okay.
And so here I am, my little bike and my helmet and riding across town. And there were all these alleys, but that comic book shop was in the kind of counterculture neighborhood. Right. And there were all these alleys covered in graffiti and murals. And I'm like, this is so cool. This is a completely other visual language that I didn't know about. And the colors are great.
LA
the lettering style is great. In LA, it's wow, there's so much stuff happening here. This is so cool. And making stuff that's big, that's nice. Never occurred to me that I would do it, or that I didn't even think that I had interest in it.
But it entered your consciousness.
Thing in the back of my head that one day, not even one day that I would do it, that this is cool. I like this.
Right.
I want to look at more of it.
Right.
And then 2013, I was teaching spray paint at Camp Ramah, Ojai, California. And I said, hey, we have this handball court over here, and they try to do something that's ugly. Can you paint a mural on it? I figured, can't be that hard. Watch them.
So it was someone else.
It was someone else said, hey, we have this wall. Can you do it? And that was the first time I thought, oh, yeah, I could probably do it.
Okay, you're 2 for 2 on all these things happening around you. You're the last to find out.
Apparently, someone needs to tell me earlier. Do this. I think I would benefit from that a lot. That's why I watched a couple of Shepard Fairey YouTube videos of him painting. I figured, okay, I can backwards figure this out.
Right.
Did a piece, worked out really well. I also visually I thought it was great. The camp responded really positively to it, and I loved the effect of this giant piece. And then again, all these pieces kind of clicked into place. That here I am living in Los Angeles at the time, and all over LA, you have all these different communities who are putting up murals in their own community. Some of the stuff some of the murals are just murals, right? It's beautiful to be beautiful or interesting to be interesting, and
Right.
colors and lettering, whatever. But you go to different ethnic communities, and the art reflects the community that's there and reflects the artist. And I thought, why are there no Jewish ones of this?
Right.
Um, how cool would it be if I took this style that I like and that I work in and made a mural in it?
Right.
I don't think anyone's ever done that before. I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
And so I started doing more of them, and then I get hired to do one, or that I grant to do another one, and partner with different organizations.
Well, the Hamoti Lechem in Aretz. What's the back of Jeff's? What's the place called?
It's so next door to Jeff's, which
Okay.
is amazing.
Right.
Next door to Jeff's is a bakery called Beauty's.
Okay. Okay, so it makes sense. It was on a bakery.
So that's why.
All
So
right.
I got it.
That was like one of your early ones. Like
That's
that's
2016, I think.
okay.
Um,
That's iconic in my head.
2016. Yeah, it was one of, I think it was mural maybe number like 6 or 7. Fairly early, but I got this grant money from a Jewish art grant program run through American Jewish University, and the restriction was it had to be art with words, and so there's like poets and things like my art is words. I'm
in.
I'm gonna do a poster of words.
Right.
And the back of I had already been doing some graphic design work for the bakery, so I did the labels for their challah and I'd redesign the menus. And so I called up Dan, who owns Bakeries, and I said, "Hey, Dan, we've been talking about doing a mural on the back of your place for years.
I got the money.
I got some money. Can we do this?" And he said, "Yeah, let's do this."
That's awesome.
And it's great. So it's all these things come together. It's a 2-story mural that says Hamotzi Lachem Min Haaretz in bright yellow,
red,
spiky letters on a red background. The lettering style is highly influenced by Marc Chagall's 1919 calligraphy experiments. Bring it all together, and also it's a giant mural in a Jewish neighborhood that, as you go through, announces this is a place that Jews live.
Right.
And I love that.
Right.
And
this is a place that contemporary Jews live. Like
contemporary Jews live.
Yeah.
And I want the Jews who live in my neighborhood to come to this and to feel pride in this space of this is our space. It's writ large in this space. This is a Jewish space, and it's not just Jewish space. It's a modern Jewish space. It's an interesting Jewish space. And I also want all the non-Jewish people who drive through here to look at this and be like, oh, I can be in conversation with this community in the same way that I personally am in conversation with other communities as I drive through their neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And the more I looked into it, I think I was a lot more on the leading edge of that, because in Israel, most Israeli street artists, especially at the time at least, are tagging in English letters because they're trying to, that's what they're influenced, and they're the being Israeli part is not
wasn't developed enough.
And just it didn't hit them in the same way.
Right.
And that the scattered artists that I knew or had found out about who were working around the world were coming from different places. So Dan Groover, who's, as far as I'm aware, like the OG of Jewish murals, he's a French Olé, living in Israel,
who brought his
French
street art,
who brought his French street art to Israel and did this mural outside the Shuk that I saw when I was probably 13. It said Yerushalayim in this really cool wavy lettering. That's so cool. Solomon Souza, who started doing his work around the same time as I did. Also, an Olé comes to Israel, is like, has his art background. I'm going to do the street art thing. Just brilliant, amazing work, and is taking all these other pieces of him and reflecting that back out in a society that didn't know that it was ready for it and didn't know that it needed it.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's a whole conversation on itself, but what is the value of art? Or what's the power of art? Or what's the influence of art?
Yeah.
And you just look at the Shuk, and the Shuk at nighttime was dead.
Yes.
Shut it up, and it was dead. And what changed it? The murals, the art.
And it's great.
And now the Shuk is a thriving nightlife scene. And, you know, if you're going to dollar and cents it, you know, what's the value of each individual, mural on a shutter? We don't know. We can't quantify it. But yet, from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it is, it transformed the neighborhood or transformed the night scene in the Shuk. And that is the power of art.
and it's amazing the stuff he accomplished, especially he did so many of them, and he also was really young at the time.
Yeah,
Um,
he's a real
and
legend.
yeah, and it's amazing the kind of work and I think it in some ways it takes being an outsider to to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
able to do that or to have the desire to reflect that back out. And as far as I knew, in at least in the U.S., I think when I started, I didn't know anybody else.
right.
I was looking, I was on the hunt, and I couldn't find anybody else who was doing the kind of work that I wanted to be doing. Um, uh, I met this artist Itamar
Right.
through Asylum Arts, which was an
Also,
amazing.
also from France, or is he
No,
from South
so he's
America?
Israeli.
He's Israeli.
He's Israeli, and had been doing his Israeli street art thing, but had been integrating a lot of Hebrew calligraphy into his work in a way that I thought was amazing and a way that I'd never seen before. And we're at this young Jewish artists retreat in upstate New York. I guess it was 2014 or so, and we hit it off immediately. You're doing this cool stuff, and you're doing this cool stuff, and I'm thinking like, you're Israeli. How did you even think that this was a thing that you could do? And he's looking at me like, you're American. Like, I know American Jews are not interested in this at all. Like, what are you doing? Um, and we teamed up. We applied for grant money. He came to LA. We did a few murals in LA. I went to Israel. We did a couple of murals in Israel. That's where one of the murals was at the 2015
Yes,
Biennale, which is where I met Rami.
yes.
Um,
Well,
and
he was part of the Popthodox show that I was part of. He
oh
he did a
yeah.
piece straight on the wall, in Bet Hasid.
And so uh, it was this whole thing of, this is so cool. I'm doing this and you're doing this, and we can be in this community together, meeting other artists and feeding off. Um, and that was what put the seed in my head of, there are all these mural festivals. Powwow is doing all these things all around. Um, why can't there be an excuse to bring Jewish muralists together? Not just
Amen.
Jews who are muralists, but the scattered. I think at the time I had a roster of like 8 people.
Right.
And I was looking really hard of who are the people who, by virtue of their own personal drive,
Right.
are putting Judaism, in whatever the way they see it, into big public art
Out on the street.
out on the street.
How you share it with others.
Yeah. And and I was looking really hard and finding people, and then okay, well, if I can get a few $1,000s from here and a few $1,000s from here and a few $1,000s from here, and then called up Rami and said, Rami, what if we did a whole pavilion in Jerusalem of just street artists?
Yes.
And then you don't have to hang anything.
We'll find some walls.
We'll figure it out. And it was amazing.
It really was.
And
really was.
it brought together all these people who, really to that point, again, were working their own independent little worlds.
Yeah.
That I'm doing my thing, you're doing your thing. You had just started doing, I think you were also only just a handful of murals in at that point.
Possibly. I don't even remember. Yeah.
And Judy Kopelman, who I had found online, who was doing these brilliant, funny, kind of sarcastic stencil pieces around Israel that had different psukim and then a picture. I think my favorite one was Loto, Don Lefadel, so not good for men to be alone from Breshit. And they had a bunch of kids on their cell phones. It was brilliant and funny
Yes,
and
yeah.
different. And she's also 20 years older than I am.
Right. Right.
And she
been out there doing
she was
her
like
thing for
Den
right,
mom
yeah.
doing her thing, and
Right.
she's doing her thing, and Shlomi Hayan, who's doing his
Yes.
hamsas all over the place, and who else do we get on board? The Nor Mizrahi, who you had on the
Yes.
show already,
Yes.
who also is bringing in her influences. I think Ella Ponevetsky, who is doing large scale Yiddish calligraphic mural in a completely different style, and also comes from a completely different political background, personal background. All Jews, all putting our Judaism out there from completely different places. And it was so gratifying to put
Yes.
this work out there. And none of us are world famous. None of us are raking in 30 grand on a mural like some of the big guys who tour the world are. I hope that some of us are celebrities in our little communities.
In our own little worlds.
Our own little worlds. And what was I think the most gratifying part of all of it was when I was recruiting for 2020. That one of the artists who I had approached and said, hey, I had reached out and said, hey, I saw a piece that you did, and looked really cool and had some Hebrew stuff, and I'm glad to know there's another person out there. And he emailed back and said, yeah, I saw one of the pieces that you did.
Amazing. Yeah, so that's it.
And it hit me right here of, oh my God, I had an effect on the world.
Yes, and yes.
And it was, yeah, I'm tearing up right now just thinking, like, it was one of the most powerful experiences of my art did something to somebody.
Yes.
So
Amen.
I think it's
Amen.
for all
So I got a challenge for you.
Yeah.
That was 17?
Then we did the first one?
Then we did the first one.
2019.
That was 2019.
It was right before COVID.
Right before COVID. Okay. So the challenge is, just like you did a Parsha a week, let's do a Jewish street art festival once a year.
I would love to. So
Gotta make it happen.
We did 2019. We did 2020.
Yes.
2020, we were hoping to do a big thing in America, and I was putting all the pieces together, and then COVID hit. And one of my artists said, why should we cancel it? And said, what if instead of canceling it, we do one piece in each city? And that artist was you.
Right, we did the menorah.
And I was like, oh, that's genius. What if we each did do a piece in our own city? It cuts our travel costs, but also we have so much more exposure.
Right.
And also we can give back in a different way. And this is a dark time, and we can do this thing. And your whole theme of your piece was darkness light. That's exactly what this is. And I'm so grateful to you for coming up with this because it didn't occur to me. And it was an amazing success. We got some good publicity from it. There was a very, very small 2021 that was directly funded by Canvas. It was just 4 pieces because that was how much money they had.
Right.
2022, 2023, there was a bunch of other stuff going on. I think I spent most of 2022, I had a kid. 2023, I put all my effort into this show in Jerusalem this past year.
Yep.
My hope is that 2025.
Okay. Let's do it.
Keep your eyes peeled. 2025, probably spring, Orange County, JCC.
Jewish Street Art Festival.
There.
2025.
We're working out the details now and hope to get this all pieced together.
Amazing.
And hopefully get the next generation of kids, Jewish kids, to look at this stuff and say, this is amazing. Yes. How come I didn't see this before? Also, I'm inspired now to take my own visual references and make cool stuff. It's funny because I get asked a lot, either by kids or at classes, what do you want the kids to make? What do you want the skills the kids to have to make after this? I don't care if they never make stencils again. I don't care if they never do calligraphy again. All the whatever skills that I teach them. I want the kid who's into anime to do an anime Haggadah. I want the kid who's into whatever beat poetry to do that. Like I want people to feel that they're connected to this long heritage of creativity and innovation, and introspection and deep learning, and to have the interest to make the stuff, the freedom to make the stuff, also the interest to then do some research.
Right.
If you're doing spoken word poetry, are there Jews who've done spoken word poetry? In fact, there are. Go find them.
Yep.
A lot of them are still around. They would love to talk to you on the phones. They're all on the internet.
Yep.
Yeah, whatever your deal is, there's probably someone who has done that, and you can talk to them. And if there isn't somebody who's done that, don't let that stop you. You can be that person.
Yes.
Don't feel afraid. Don't feel hamstrung by this, and just do it. And if it doesn't work out, okay. If you're interested in it, don't let that stop you. If you're a creative person, I feel like for a lot of us this is true. You do a thing, not all your stuff works out.
Right.
Do a different thing.
Just keep on going.
Try a different one. Maybe you'll discover in a few years that the thing that you tried a few years ago just wasn't quite right. It needed a little bit of tweaking, and then you could try it again, and it'll be amazing.
Yes.
Or maybe just the world wasn't ready for it yet.
We could keep going forever.
I know.
But you kind of almost answered it. He somewhat answered it. But our closing question, and I think we should do a part two when we're ready for our next street art festival.
Yeah.
But the closing question of the Orange Socks podcast is, what's your advice for young creatives to find their orange socks to share their passionate Jewish art?
Yeah, I think that was so much what we were talking about, but I think in direct simplified form, it's whatever your perspective is, whatever your interests are, find a way to bring that out. It doesn't matter if anyone's done it, if anyone hasn't done it, if find your people, whether those are actual living people in community with, maybe those are historical figures that you could find in books on the internet or elsewhere, working in the same medium as you are, working in different things than you are, but who are thinking in the same direction. Connect to that, use that as fuel and as energy, and make stuff. Don't worry about not being, just go out there and do stuff. And if it's meaningful for you, then
It'll
great.
be meaningful for others.
It'll be meaningful for others.
Yeah.
And if you don't have others, if you're too embarrassed to show it to other people, or maybe you're just not interested in showing it to other people, and you're just making it for you personally, that's also fine. Doing stuff l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, is a perfectly legitimate thing to do, as long as you are finding meaning in it.
Right.
Don't hesitate to find that meaning and that outlet, and just go for it.
Amen. Amen. Hillel, thank you so much.
It was such a pleasure.
This is so much fun. We could keep on going for a while. Hillel, I got a gift for you. So, as you can see, the orange socks. So we got one guy wearing his orange socks, sharing his uniqueness with the world. There's a clip. That'll help you a lot.
That does not help me at all. But it's good.
Hillel, thank you very much.
היום נעשה משהו בלתי נשכח